So, you want to collect 40k's Eldar race. Whether it's because you love the models or you have opponents you want to make cry, we have you covered. Our narrative global campaign, where your submitted games change the story, is in full swing. Thank you for all the submissions so far. It's free to get involved with our campaign pack, which is in the description. Patreons, of course, get the full pack. The Patreon-only giveaways continue. Congratulations to last month's winners in Tokyo, Andover and Frankfurt. Your items should be arriving any day now if they are not already with you. This month we are increasing the giveaway to 3 combat patrols or equivalent. To get involved and have a 1 in 16 chance of winning, you can join the Patreon for as little as £3 a month. We also post anywhere in the world at our expense. Finally, the Warhound. We are almost at 2,000 subs. It will be rehomed. It could be yours. When starting out, I would say these are the 3 key characters you want to consider when taking a force. The Farseer and Autarch can come on a jet bike, which of course I would say take as you see fit to synergise with your collection. The Farseer is the iconic Psyker of the Aeldari, and in game this translates to having powerful psychic shooting attacks and buffs such as Fortune, making the targeted unit be even harder to wound. The Autarch is limited by their ability to only join Guardian squads, but does sport tons of flexibility, being able to take a ton of equipment to be deadly at both shooting and combat. To top this off, the Autarch also generates you an extra command point for every turn it is on the table and remains alive and kicking. Finally, the Spiritseer. If you intend to take any Wraith Guard whatsoever, I would 100% not be leaving home without them, due to the fact they make Wraith units hit better and grant them lethal hits. It's a 2-for-1, it's a no-brainer. The Aeldari, or Eldar, are an iconic faction whose history stretches beyond understanding, with their most notable achievement being creating the Chaos God Slaanesh by partying a bit too well. University students, please take notes. The Aeldari have also existed pre-2nd edition in board games like Space Crusade. These 3 Aeldari craft worlds are among the most famous. Iyanden, in their striking bright yellow, are at the brink of extinction due to having to deal with raids from Chaos War fleets, and Orc-War, and most importantly, High Fleet Kraken almost annihilating them in full. Due to this, Iyanden utilise many Wraith constructs, which are made from Wraith bone, a material harder than that of ceramite and piloted by the souls of fallen Eldar whose souls were trapped in a gem at the point of death to prevent the Chaos God Slaanesh having a good old snack. Saim-Hann, the Wild Riders, known for their speed and savagery, are quite the opposite, sporting one of the largest craft worlds that make use of a large number of jet bikes and transports to ensure rapid strikes and swift retreats. They are probably the most iconic Aeldari faction, often being the faction's poster boys. Finally, Ulthw&e, another large craft world in which Eldred Ulthw&e, one of the most powerful psykers in the galaxy, calls home. Ulthw&e, in their jet black and bone armour, does not sport a large number of elite aspect warriors, seeking to lean on its citizen guardian militia. Due to their proximity to the Eye of Terror, they also sport a larger than normal amount of psykers, manifesting in the ranks of their Farseers and Warlocks. Where to start? This is the most basic of basic choices, but yet an effective one. By buying 2 combat patrols at discount through retailers such as Goblin Games, you can get everything pictured here twice, which adds up to around 990 points, which is ideal for playing your first 1000 point games of Warhammer 40k. The Farseers will keep your Guardians safe with the Fortune buff whilst assisting with damage output, and your Wind Riders can put out a devastating number of shots, especially on enemies who may be sat on objectives. The Wraith Lords also become a nightmare for any opponent to deal with, as they can be geared to both fire devastating weaponry or pull units apart in melee with their Ghost Glaive. This army will perform well and play the game well due to its speed and hard hitting capability. The downside is some opponents will tear those Guardian squads apart with ease. Good play, however, will keep them more or less safe and scoring. At £160 you really can't go wrong. This also fits Ulthw&e's lore of making use of a large number of citizen units such as the Wind Riders and Guardians, whilst also having a higher than normal number of Psykers. To expand this, adding a Wave Serpent or 2 for the Guardians and maybe some Warlock Skyrunners to support the Wind Riders could quickly see you expand to the 1500 mark for relatively cheap. If the Ghost Army of the Iyanden is more to your tastes, I would recommend taking a Spiritseer with Reader of Runes to allow you to reroll Trash Fate dice, whilst taking a second Spiritseer with the Phoenix Gem and the Wraith Blades to ensure they remain safe whilst fighting in combat. You can either run the 2 Wraithguard and Blade units as 2 squads of 5 or blocks of 10. The upside being the blocks are easier to buff and a nightmare to remove, but you do lose board control and you will struggle to cap objectives as you will effectively only have 3 units on the table, if you run it this way. Gameplay wise, this is quite a tough nut to crack, especially at 1000 points, but it is slow and lacks variety. To expand, an obvious choice is the Titanic Wraith Knight and maybe some Dire Avengers to deal with weaker enemy infantry. £180 price tag at discount does make this army nicely affordable as a starting point. Rivaling the Raven Guard for their need for speed, the Saim-Hann list sports a Farseer Skyrunner and 2 individual Warlock Skyrunners. Each one will lead a separate Windrider squad. The advantage of the Warlocks is they are able to either remove the cover bonus for an enemy unit or grant their own unit stealth, meaning if you take scatter lasers or want to stay safe, you can't be shot if you're further than 12 inches away. The Warlock does also add some damage output and combat threat when needed. The Farseer of course can manipulate fate dice and give a key unit a reroll to hit with their guide ability. To round the 1000 points off, 10 Guardians or Storm Guardians in a Wave Serpent and a Viper jet bike can provide the list some much needed anti-tank. To expand this, I would recommend maybe some Fire Prisms for proper anti-tank and potentially some combat aspect warriors such as Howling Banshees or the awesome Striking Scorpions, who will fit in very well with their ferocious brethren. Based on factors of price and fun, I'm placing the Ulthw&e Double Combat Patrol in the top spot as it's the most affordable, gives you a nice number of units and fits the lore of Ulthw&e nicely. On top of this, if you do take it as Ulthw&e, they are the easiest to paint and the scheme also looks great. You can also expand it with whatever you want as your 1000 points from the 2 combat patrols will be very balanced. Second for me is the Saim-Hann. Yes, it is the most expensive at £306. It is, however, the most fun army, making use of clever synergies and rewarding you for solid tactical play. It's easy to expand as discussed, whilst remaining thematic. Third place of course is the Iyanden. Being third does not mean it's bad by any means, but it is tough and it is a forgiving army to play with, which could be ideal for someone starting 40k, whilst also being a nightmare at 1k for your opponent to deal with as everything is as tough as a tank. It is, once again though, a slow army that will suffer greatly against a dedicated shooting army. It will also be a very one-dimensional army that will struggle to play the game at times due to their inability to have board control and hold more than 2 objectives at a time if you choose to squad them into blocks of 10. My personal experience collecting Eldar started with the new Rangers and Ranger jet bikes. I have collected the army as a teenager, but that was before I left the hobby, so I guess it was inevitable that I would return to them in time. I've gone for a custom craft world, loosely based on Yggdrasil, Mimera and a Latok. I found some of the older models can need a bit filling around the joins and careful sanding to retain smooth surfaces. That's found on many units such as the Wraith Knight for example. Less is more with the Eldar, and in short, don't paint every node on them as a gem, choose a select few as you can see on the Guardians' chests and guns. Things I would do differently looking back is I wish I'd planned a 2000 point list opposed to just painting a unit at a time with no thoughts of cohesion. I do have a few Forge World units which I would advise against purchasing as we have seen so much move to Legends recently, so unless it's just for a pure love of the model, I'd avoid anything from them for a little bit until we can really know what's going on with the edition. Getting your models onto the table. For beginners or people wanting a tabletop standard, I will always recommend contrast paint, but will also advise that it does not work on larger models with flat surfaces, such as tanks, without airbrush application, and this is due to the horrible patchy finish it leaves. That being said, Mediocre Hobbies provides a decent speed paint for the Ulthw&e craft world, which is super easy and anyone can pick up even if you've never held a paintbrush due to some canon event in your life. This short by the Painting Coach is fantastic and shows excellent application of contrast paint. As mentioned before, large flat surfaces may be an issue down the line without an airbrush, but this can always be circumvented with a can of red spray paint. It's also a mad quick tutorial which will allow you to paint an army in a weekend if you applied yourself. It's defo one of the better tutorials out there for contrast paint. Cult of Paint again making an appearance. I included this as it's a totally different style. They go for a more weathered, realistic look to the Iyanden. The downside of these tutorials as always is that they are not beginner friendly and require that you have a lot of different paints and equipment in order to do it. My personal go-to if you want a yellow army as a starter is to grab some Colourforge yellow spray paint and some light brown contrast paint to use as a wash. Welcome to the end of the video, and thank you for staying put through this surface information. If it was helpful, drop the likes and subscrizzle. Any feedback, drop that as well, as we want to improve in the long run and provide quality information. Don't forget about our giveaways, and a massive thank you to all our patrons. You are making the constant work required to keep the channel going worth it. Thank you, and until the next one, have a good day.